Ready?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. No worries. Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, October 3rd, 2022 Select Board meeting. My name is Rich Mucci. I'm the chair of the Winchester Select Board. With me this evening, Vice Chair Anthea Brady, Mariano Guluboff, John Fallon, Michael Betancourt, and Acting Town Manager Beth Rudolph. We will begin. Beth, we have no donations tonight. We'll begin with your report, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So just a few things, quick updates. First, the Winchester Health Department has a series of flu clinics happening this fall. The school community is, the health department's running separate clinics within each school, so you can register. I think today is the last day to register for those. And then we have other public high-dose flu clinics on October 11th, October 19th, October 24th, and November 7th, and anybody can register for those on the town's website. We also have fall town meeting coming up, which begins on Thursday, November 10th. It's a little bit delayed this year because of the election on November 8th. The town manager's hearing is scheduled for Thursday, November 3rd at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom, and there'll be more information to come on that. As I noted, the state election is being held on Tuesday, November 8th. All polling will happen at the Winchester High School, 80 Skillings Road. There's also options to vote by mail. Voters should have received something in the mail from the Secretary of State with postcards with that information. And then there's also going to be early voting at Town Hall here in the Winchester room just below us for several days starting October 22nd and running through November 4th. So I hope everybody will be able to take advantage of that early voting opportunity. I also want to make note, there's been a lot of discussion in the news recently about high electricity costs. So here in Winchester, we have what's called wind power. In 2017, the town launched this Winchester's Community Choice Electricity Program, and the intent of the program is to provide more electricity supply options and increase renewable energy options for the town of Winchester and its residents. We just renewed our program for the third time in December of 2022, and we were able to lock in rates between December 22 and December 24. There's 3 programs that the town provides. It's a basic, standard, and Wind Power 100. All of these programs will be more expensive under our new contract. However, they are still well below the rates for what we expect the Eversource costs to be for their basic customers. I provided a chart with the help of our sustainability director in my memo that gives a breakdown of what the percent of renewable energy that is used to generate that power for both the basic, standard, and the Wind Power 100 options. The rates for the 2020 through 22 contract, and the proposed rates going forward starting in January of 23. And then we also provided a comparison of what we expect the Eversource rates to be based on the rates that were, based on the percentage increase that National Grid issued. We don't have the actual rates for Eversource in Winchester yet, but we use that as an example. And overall, there's expected savings of up to $100, or over $100 a month because of the Wind Power program. So I think we've been very lucky in being able to have this community power program in Winchester. And several of the board members here were, I think, involved when that was originally brought online. So I'm going to skip over the construction updates. There's not much to add from where we were last week. The only thing I will note is on the Eversource 345 kV project, they did finish up work on Washington Street. The only work that they have left on Washington Street is at the river crossing near the Winchester Hospital facility. There are paving projects going on throughout town. Various streets I have listed here in my memo, and then also information is available on the town's website. And then a couple other things I wanted to mention. At the last meeting, Mr. Fallon asked about the staffing for our police and fire departments. So I did speak to the chiefs for both those departments. And the police department, they are currently down 1 position due to an officer's retirement in June, and they expect to have 3 additional openings created in January due to upcoming retirements. So they'll have 4 officers entering the academy in November, to replace them. And he expects that they'll graduate in May, and then they'll be fully staffed at that time. And the fire department, they are up to 49 of 50 positions filled. And the next firefighter entrance exam is in the next few weeks. And so they'll hold off until March when the new list of candidates is released. And then finally, one exciting community note, the Chamber of Commerce is holding its annual Halloween decorating contest starting October 1st, running through October 27th. It's $25 to enter, and there's a first, second, and third place, and there's prizes available and judging. I think Rich and I were the lucky judges last year, so it's a fun event. It's fun, even if you don't participate, to drive around and see all the places that great decorations that people put up. So thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Any questions for Beth? You all entering the Halloween decorating contest? All right, great. Thank you, Beth, for that update. We'll move on to public comment. If anyone's here for public comment, commenting on our agenda items, you have up to 3 minutes to speak for the board. Come forward. I'll recognize you. Just state your name and address, and you can speak. Anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, we're going to keep moving. I don't see Brian Sikeli yet. Do we have everyone here on the transfer station, North Reservoir? Dam update? All right, why don't you guys come on up? We'll get you out of here. Jay's going to watch Monday Night Football, I heard. No, you're not. I've seen you play.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two projects, as you just said. The first one will be the transfer station, and the second one will be the North Reservoir. Two big projects of many projects, as Town Manager Beth Rudolph just talked about. The first one, like I said, we'll have Lee Kosker from Weston Sampson. He's in charge of the transfer station. To my left is Mike DePalmer. He's in charge of the North Reservoir Dam. We also have Nick Polly, who's assisting us overseeing the transfer station project. Can you get, Lee, go ahead.
Okay, bear with me. I think the wrong presentation is up here.
Defer to the dam first.
Yeah,
we
can start with the dam.
We can start with the dam
Is
first.
that all right?
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
Lance's
Yeah, there's a different
It's communication
presentation.
study. Go with the dam.
So I was planning on giving a quick update on
Sure.
the background of the dam, which I'm sure most of you guys know why we're out there.
Do you want the flyover or the?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start with the flyover. We did do a flyover, and here's a quick snip of it. This was done in late July, so a lot of work's been done since then. You can see the slope armoring here on the upstream side of the dam. And in this video, they're working on the tow drain on the downstream side. One thing to note as we finish up is the groundwater treatment system that's set up at the end there. And yeah, we can switch over to the PowerPoint now. So the dam impounds the North Reservoir, which is part of the town's drinking water system. Water flows from the north to the middle reservoir to the south reservoir and ends up at the town's water treatment facility. A couple years back, inspection of the dam found deficiencies in the dam that were out of compliance with the Office of Dam Safety regulations. So we're currently out there doing improvements to the dam to bring it back into compliance with the state regs.
Is there more pages to this?
Yeah, if you want to, yep, right there is good. So the current contract end date is December 14th, 2022. The contractor is currently forecasting to be done in January of 2023. Hopefully by that point in time, it's mostly just going to be restoration, cleaning up the site, kind of some final touch-up work. Should be mostly done by the December date. Some challenges with the schedule is you saw the large groundwater treatment system, some of the contaminated soil out there. We're finding a lot of it. Wetland impacts, something to deal with while we're out there, and just some other, miscellaneous civil and structural things we're working through at the dam, especially including like the water piping that runs through the dam to the pump station on site, and the piping and the valve work inside the gatehouse, how the dam will be regulated, the level of the reservoir will be regulated in the future. And I included a couple more pictures in case that video didn't work for us, but.
When we talk about the stone and what the differences from the old dam to the new dam.
Yeah, so the front of the dam has been built up. A lot of stone's been brought in. It improves the dam for slope stability. It was too steep and out of compliance originally. So I don't know if you can see from that photo, but now it's benched. It also can withstand any seismic evaluation's been done. It can withstand any seismic loadings that will ever affect it.
The only thing I'll add is it's still, we had to pump 200 million gallons, I believe, to bring it down to a certain level that we have.
150 million gallons, yeah.
It's still pretty low. We're still hoping we have a rainy season to fill that dam back up so we can actually produce water over to the middle, to the south reservoir.
And we're not anticipating drawing the reservoir down any farther during construction, so it'll just,
Is it on the rise at this point, or are we still keeping it down
yeah, it's on the rise at this point, but
slowly?
it's been pretty dry, so,
So that's it on the north reservoir. You have any questions on it?
So that dam needs to be wet, is that the levee around, is that how it works? You know, I mean, it's not a concrete dam, so it must retain a certain amount of moisture, right?
yeah, so the,
Yeah,
da-
and then.
there actually is
the other side of it.
there's a masonry core wall through the middle of the dam,
Okay,
which would block I mean, it's designed to block seepage. It's on rock, but there is a concrete core wall, brick masonry core wall through the middle of it.
so that was,
That's been there since the 1800s,
Okay. All right.
and we're not touching that.
Do you have to revegetate the other side of it, or?
Yep,
every spring?
there'll be loam and seeding done, and then also wetland restoration.
But no trees, you don't want trees.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
trees, no trees.
That's where we have the problem on the south.
South Reservoir, yeah.
So,
Will-
okay.
So Jason, South Reservoir constructed the same way with the interior concrete structure?
Pretty much it is.
I believe
yes.
there's a core wall at the
Similar,
south as well.
Yeah, with the, coming in the input, yeah. Any other questions?
Will the trails, I know there's a trail detour there right now, will those go back to,
Yep,
What was
the
previously?
road that ran through basically the middle of the dam will be there.
Okay. Other questions?
Okay, we'll go on the transfer station?
Sure.
All right,
Leak?
so on to the transfer station. By way of background, in fall of last year, town meeting approved $6.5 million for various improvements to the existing transfer station. That project also went through permitting through the Mass DEP Solid Waste Division. Generally included in the project are new waste collection areas, demolition of the existing incinerator, and various repairs to the existing facilities that have been deferred for some time. After going out to public bids, Seaver was selected as the general contractor for the project. So to date, there's been a good amount of work completed. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail on every item that's been completed so far, but for some of the highlights, in terms of utilities, water and sewer has been installed for the new staff trailer. Electrical conduit installation is ongoing. There's a good amount of it that needs to be put in because ultimately the electric at the site is being relocated from the incinerator building, you can see there, to a new location down by the tipping building. In terms of storage pads, various new concrete pads for hard-to-manage goods, things like propane tanks, white goods, the Universal has waste shed, tires, things along those lines. Those have been installed and turned over to the town. There's also an additional concrete pad put in for mattresses, which is going to be the next item on Mass DEP's waste ban list.
The other pad was the scale house that I just showed pictures earlier this morning.
So that comes up
today, right?
That comes up under new construction. The prefab scale house and attendant booth were dropped off today to the site. The staff trailer is also complete. It's just awaiting drop off and installation in its final location. Also, the electrical addition has been, the walls are up, the roof is going on as we speak, so that should be done in the next few weeks. In terms of demolition, the incinerator abatement is ongoing, and there have been a number of other smaller demo items. The former radio shed, concrete from which you can see there, was demolished. We also identified the foundation for the old smokestack on the incinerator, as well as 2 radio tower footings that weren't shown on any of the old plans. So those also had to get demolished because they conflicted with some of the new things that are going in. In terms of repairs, the tipping building roof has been replaced, the existing conveyor has been repaired, and paint is going up throughout the facility, which definitely improves the visual appeal of everything. So for upcoming work, in the next 2 weeks, roughly, the stormwater infiltration structures will be installed on the lower portion of the site. Work is ongoing on the new recycling area, including driving a sheet pile wall that separates the upper portion, where the residents will drive in, drop off their recycling, from the lower portion, which is now going to be pretty much strictly set aside for town vehicles. So that work's ongoing. Once the sheet pile is finished in the new recycling area, we'll be excavating the soil on the back side of it to establish the final grades. Then we can start the process of getting the concrete in. And once that is done, we can ultimately move the compactors down to that lower location, which kind of opens up that part of the facility as envisioned for the public's use.
Real quick, with the stormwater infiltration system coming up, there are going to be some impacts on service. The work is going to happen over a Saturday evening, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and we're planning to open the transfer station at 3 o'clock on that Tuesday.
Originally, I think I told you it was gonna be tomorrow, but
Right.
it
Yeah,
got
so
delayed
that
at least
Tuesday
a week or
is
two, right?
still up in the air. It's looking like it's 2 weeks out. We should have better clarity this week.
The reason for that is that where those trailers are that you can see is that's where it's actually going. We can't pull those trailers out to take trash out of the
Yep.
facility, yeah.
Yep. Most of the area down there is ultimately going to get basically torn up for a couple of days. So to get the trucks in and out, there has to be a bit of a downtime, unfortunately. In general, we're on track for completion in late spring, early summer 2023. One of the major, I'm going to call it uncertainties in the project schedule is Eversource. The timeline with them and the new service getting installed is kind of a critical path item here. From what I understand, the license agreements on the agenda for later this evening, so hopefully that's one of the final administrative hurdles to get Eversource out there and get their portion of the project completed. I mentioned earlier that new recycling area is kind of a big focus right now on getting that done, prepped, and the compactors moved over. We understand the last couple weeks, especially since we're down to 2 compactors, it has caused some headaches for the residents in terms of drop-offs at certain times of day. So that's kind of a priority on getting that resolved and turned over to hopefully alleviate those concerns going forward.
When will that be?
We're looking at before Thanksgiving, knock on wood, if everything aligns. One of the items with that, though, is that Eversource interconnection, because the new power needs to be brought over to those compactors. Sheet pile will be in this week. The soil excavation will probably be next week. Concrete shortly thereafter. So it's just getting all the moving pieces to align just right so that we can hit that, basically Thanksgiving of this year date.
On top of that, we have the recycling chutes that need to be fabricated in to overhaul the existing compactors, because we're going to reuse those compactors on site.
Yep.
They wanted to wait for the overhaul until they can tie them into the chute system.
Beth, I don't know if you want to talk about the meeting you had today about card reading system.
Oh, yeah, so we had just the initial meeting today with the vendor to talk about the plate reader system. So we have a little bit of work to do on our side internally to figure out how we'll, kind of what database we'll use to create that link. Nothing too much more to report in terms of just that we're working on it and hope to have it done moving forward.
Thank
Yep.
Just a quick slide on financials. The original contract value with Seaver was, call it 5.5 million. Change orders to date have been about 100,000, bringing us to a new total of 5.6 million. Through 9/1, only 800,000 and some change has been expended of that. That being said, in the last month, there's been a significant ramp up in kind of contractor presence, various subcontractors and everything else. So we should see, you know, kind of a greater amount of money having to go out the door this month. That leaves us with 4.8 million left when you factor in the engineering fees for the project. And we're sitting at about 400,000 remaining for additional change orders if needed. So as of today, we're on track for, you know, delivering the project as proposed on the budget that was assigned.
Great.
I would just like to thank all the residents during this construction. We've kind of designed the recycling area. It's been kind of tight there, but I have to say the residents have been pretty well helpful with us in working through the project.
And I saw Saturday, there was somebody there that was directing traffic and having people park here and here and here, so that was also very helpful.
Yeah.
Because, so, you know, thanks to the staff at the transfer station, Nick, for, you know, stepping up. I know it's a tough to work there with, you know, active construction zone. So.
It is.
Yeah.
I agree. Any questions? All right.
All right.
Thank you all for
very much.
coming in.
Have a good
Appreciate it for the
night.
update.
Take care.
Thanks, Lee.
Next up, Brian?
Hey.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just-
PTA zoning update?
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you. So I've given you a PDF in the packet and then realized that there's a lot of these slides are actually pretty dense.
What are you gonna do? All right, you wanna do accessory dwellings first, or you
No, I
wanna?
don't, that's totally the wrong one.
It's Brian, when you go through your presentation, because I read it and I was just trying to understand like the density relative to what we have now. It seems like it could be really dense, but maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No, I have a slide about that, and I will definitely talk about that.
Because I'm trying to figure out where we're gonna put all these units, okay?
That's a good question.
The weird part is that you don't have to, and that's what's even crazier about the whole law, that we could have a whole very long conversation about. Essentially, we have to zone for these units.
Right.
There is no mandate to actually build any of these
Just gonna
units.
ask, we don't have to approve them, right? Yeah.
But it's a whole weird thing. It's like, well, if we can't physically build them, why are we zoning for them in the first place? Like, there's a lot of questions
Right.
that many planners are asking the state. So, please stop at any time. This is 10 slides, but like I said, there's a lot here, and it's this one. The final guidelines have been out, so now things are going to start to heat up in terms of what's required to stay compliant. So, the agenda, very quickly going to go through the purpose of the new legislation, what happens if we don't comply, and the main one is here, these changes between the draft and the final guidelines. And I'm going to highlight the concerns that I had with the draft and what and the town in general that had with those draft guidelines, and how some of them have actually been addressed, not directly towards my comments, but they actually do solve some of the concerns that some of us have had, and then go quickly through next steps. So again, the purpose of the new legislation is just to encourage these communities, there's 175 of them, to adopt zoning districts or overlays, a zoning tool of some kind where multifamily zoning is permitted as of right. And this is largely based upon a lot of housing studies that basically say by 2030 we're about 200 to 250,000 units down than at the rate that we're currently going in the Boston metro region. So not just for Winchester, that 200,000 is Eastern Mass. So here it is. The legislation is to adopt multifamily, which means structures that have 4+ units, at 15 units per acre, specifically to do this, 15 units per acre to create more walkable neighborhoods near transit. So this gets a little bit to your point, John, of what do we allow now, what does that look like now? So right now in the RG, the blue area right here on the zoning map behind you in the top, the light, like the sky blue, the RG, this is the single and two family zone. So in that whole zone right now, the density is 8 units per acre. That's what's on the ground right now. The area that splits that blue area, the GBD 2 and 3, which is the red and the orange, and I can just, so at least people know kind of where I'm talking about, but this area here, this is the GBD 2 and the GBD 3. The density in that area right now, in the zoning bylaw right now, is about a little over 13 units per acre.
So this only, does it apply within, it has to be within a half mile of the station, and are those zones within a half mile of the station, or not so much?
It does have to be in a half a mile, however, there are changes in the final guidelines that allows us to put this puzzle piece together that would allow those zones to be part of this district. So it has to be, well, I'll get to it. But basically now, it has to be, a half a mile has to be within, you have to have at least a half a mile instead of it being a whole, instead of it being, let me get there, sorry. This is just explaining the GBD 2 and 3, that the only way to get those 4 units, so you can actually go a little higher, you can actually get 4 units there right now in the GBD 2 and 3 if you put commercial on the first floor. This is like a density bonus that you can get to go to, and that goes up to 26.8. So right now on the ground in the GBD 2 and 3, it's 13.4 if you do no commercial, and if you put commercial on, it's 26 units per acre. So that's what our current zoning is for those districts. There it is, so 26.8 if you put 4 units on a small lot like 6,500, which is legal. So what happens if we don't comply with this new law? That what's written into the law very clearly is that we're not eligible to receive from 4 buckets of money: the Local Capital Projects Fund, MassWorks, Housing or Housing Choice, all through the Community One Stop. The one that's the most relevant for us is MassWorks. So what are those types of projects? Here, complete streets design and implementation, corridor studies, wayfinding, bike and ped plans, economic studies, all these things. And the MassWorks grants range in from about $20,000 to $4 million. Chances of us getting those very high or very large infrastructure ones are probably low, but chance of us getting a lot of these bike and ped plans, district master plans, TUD plans, corridor studies, these types of things are definitely things that we could apply for, and are, you know, it's possible that we could get receive them. So the difference between the final and the draft guidelines is they're basically saying this is a shall. There is no should you comply, should you not comply. Cities and towns in Massachusetts, you have to comply. These 175 MBTA communities. This is a different posture from the state. Even though it was written in that way, it's a different posture now than it was in the draft guidelines. And now this is a little more controversial. I've heard that now some of them are saying that other grants may be impacted by non-compliance, not just these 3 buckets. Other people that I've talked to at the state level say that's not true. So I'm hearing mixed messages about how this could or could not affect other funding that Winchester may or may not apply for. So the areas of concern, one of the biggest concerns from the draft guidelines that a lot of people took issue with, the fact that we were designated a bus community, which didn't make sense for a number of different reasons. We are no longer now a bus community. Now we are a commuter rail community. The location of the districts. So we were trying to figure out how do we even get the GBD 2 and 3 to get into this district. It's too far away. John hit it on the head. So even though more of it is more than 0.5 miles away, what are we going to do? We also basically said that location is a problem because if we place all of our density within the center business district, it loses the opportunity to put it in several other places like the GBD 2 and 3. And the last thing that was our concern was this, we really needed some flexibility. Requiring 1,600 units in 50 acres, we had to have a minimum acreage of 50. So that was in the draft guidelines, and that was a big concern that we had. Having a minimum of 50 to put in that density just isn't physically possible. So the final guidelines here are in bold. So this is the bold are the changes that from the final, from the draft to the final. So whereas before you had to zone all of it within a half a mile of a train station, now you only need to zone 50% of it within that half mile, and then the other ones could be contiguous or not. So that allows the GBD 2 and 3 to come in.
Right, you mentioned in the memo we received that it was the town center station.
Yes.
Can we use both stations, or is it just the town center station?
You have the choice to use one or the other.
Can't use both.
You could use both, but then you'd be putting a higher density district right in the middle of a single and two family zone, whereas the CBD and the GBD 2 and 3 lends itself more for commercial activity, a little more density to support that commercial activity. So it's, yes, you could do it, but it's from a, probably, I would imagine a lot of people wouldn't want to do it there, but it maybe just makes more planning sense to put it in these districts. But yes, we could do that. We just found that this was probably the most palatable option for us to try to comply.
Okay.
So again, so the gross density was always 15. Now they're saying that it has to be 15 in the whole district, but it could be like 5 here and 25 there. But as long as the average is 15 amongst the whole district, that's a new change that we could play with. So we could have more density in the center, a little less density in GBD 2 and 3, maybe even a little less density in GBD 3. So we have the ability to do that now, whereas we didn't have the ability to do that earlier. The age restrictions hasn't changed, nothing with the suitable for families with children, nothing of that has changed. This is still all required. Whereas before the minimum acreage had to be 50 acres, now based upon GIS, the state has looked at each city and town and figured out, based upon actual developable area, how much could you do. So specific to Winchester is 37 acres. So our minimum is now we have to do this zone over 37 instead of 50. It's a small win, but we will take it. This is not a big change, but so whereas before we had to zone for 20% of our population, we had, in terms of I'm sorry, not 20% of the population, 20% of our housing units. We had to zone for that much. So that was about 1,627 units. Now, because we're in this newer category with things that changed, we're not in a bus category anymore, and they've completely eliminated the bus category, by the way. That's how much people didn't like it. So just kind of a weird thing there. But so now we have to zone for 15% of our year-round housing units, which is 1,220 units. Not really that much different than what was previously required. And that's it. All this has to be by right. So you can't do it by special permit, but you can institute a site plan review, like a design review, that type of thing. But it can't be denied. The use of it can't be denied. So like these are the 4 major things that were changed, and this is kind of more of question time for sure. These are the major changes from the draft guidelines to the final guidelines, and these are small, but they're really helpful. But they are kind of small changes. And the next steps. So this is the last slide. So we have to submit an action plan by January 31st. An action plan is me putting maybe 8 or 9 hours into this online form that they have. It's not a heavy lift, and that's how it's meant to be. It's not meant that you need to hire a consultant to have the action plan. So the planning board has committed to pursue this endeavor, but certainly don't necessarily want to move forward in a vacuum or blindly without general consensus of several other boards and committees. We obviously can't do this without town meeting. So in order to stay compliant, we have to have this action plan by the end of January, which I plan to do. And then the town meeting has to adopt this by December 31st of the following year, I'm thinking that this is such a large amount of time because they're expecting it's gonna take a couple times to get through town meeting. Again, it's a guess, but I think it's a good one. So, last question, really only question that I have for the board was, what additional information do you need to make any type of determination to also pursue this? And if you don't have any questions, that's fine, but I can, the whole point is to direct me in terms of what information you would need to be fully informed to make a decision in the next, I don't know, time, season, whatever.
Brian, could you just give us a little more information about the action plan and what that product is, and if there's public meetings or something that goes into the development
Sure.
of that plan? Yeah.
So, yeah, the action plan does not require public meetings or anything like that. It requires, a will of, it's typically planning board, select board, and other boards to try to pursue it. So what the action plan is, it shows, it's a series of questions. A lot of them are like, do you feel like you can comply now? If not, where are you deficient? What types of, are you gonna use an overlay district? If so, you don't have to write the whole zoning, but the action plan is how you could potentially comply. There's certainly no public process that is required for that, because they know that there's a public process long required to get it past town meeting. So they know that, or the state is aware that, you're gonna have to go through all of that at some point. Yeah, any other, please?
Can you just go back 2 slides? I saw something. Keep going. Right there. So the last slide there, it says, the 20% of our housing stock must be able to build by right, no special permit, just site plan review within the zoning district. So can you just maybe explain that a little
Sure.
better? So I'm just trying to understand. So we started the conversation by saying we have to zone for this, but we need to approve the plans. Is that like a site plan review, or, I mean?
Sure, so what all of this is approving the use. So there's dimensions, so there's 2 types of special permits that are given in general. There's special permits for uses and then special permit for dimensions. Too tall, too big, too wide, whatever, in the wrong place. What this zoning does is allow the use of multifamily at 4+ per units at 15 units per acre by right. That use is by right. You don't need permission for that use. You may need permission for lots of other things, meaning you're too close to the setback, excuse me, you're too much impervious surface, those are dimensions. So what this does is allow that use. Right now, the only way to do four units in the GBD 2 and 3, for example, is if you put commercial on the first floor. That would not be allowed under the zoning because you're forcing someone to make commercial in order to do housing. What this legislation says is that you have to allow the use of 4+ units everywhere. And if that doesn't answer
But it's by right, so somebody could just come in with a building permit application to.
Yeah, I mean, that's my question, right? So by right, you can come in and build a 4-family house in Winchester under this zoning.
You could, yes, but right now, it's essentially I'm saying you can do that, you can do it right now. You can, the use, 4 units over commercial right now, you can go get a building permit for right now, same thing.
The commercial being the catch, though, but now we're limiting that.
Commercial being
so-
the catch, exactly.
So, I mean, that's something new.
It is definitely, it's definitely something, the CBD is essentially, this is already compliant. Our CBD is a de facto 40R, which is a smart growth district, which basically complies with all this. That's not the issue. You hit it on the head though. The issue is that how are we going to deal with GBD 2 and 3, and is that going to change things for the better?
Right, so Brian, how much money, or can you find out how much money we've gotten from those grants? Because as a resident, I said, well, that's great, we've gotten $60,000 of grants over 10 years. Now, my whole neighborhood could become 2 to 4 families, when it's been single family. I'm willing to give up the $60,000, $100,000. I'll wait until the state threatens us to do something different, and then I'll react.
No, that a lot of cities and towns, certainly that are on the west side, these adjacent, so now there's no bus community, but they're called adjacent communities. That's the exact posture they're doing of like, this is, because they physically can't, we can do it, they physically can't do it, and are just like, what are we supposed to do with this? This is ridiculous.
Right.
How, period. The one good thing is that the districts that we're talking about are business districts.
Right.
They're business districts that need customers. So it's different, and I think that would be the reason not to put it in Wedgemere, for example. That would change that district, that area pretty significantly. This, I feel personally, that it could help those businesses a lot if there were more people there.
But, I mean, you would agree that this would potentially, this would be a big change to the character of these neighborhoods.
Right.
I mean, it could
Potentially.
be, it could be, but right now you can do 26 units per acre. Right now, you can do 26 units per acre with commercial on the first floor.
Yeah, but you'd have to get dimensional approval.
Yeah.
Right to that. But with this, you don't have,
You have to comply with the dimensions of the, it's just.
But if you're just putting a four-family house up, 4 units, it's much easier to do.
Yeah,
By
I don't
right.
have to deal with commercial, that's a pain in my neck, I gotta go find a tenant, that kind of stuff, 4 units, I'm good, I can just populate your whole neighborhood full of them.
Brian, could you?
It's not your neighborhood though, it is the GBD 2 and 3.
I get it.
Yeah,
But
meaning
it's
there's
mostly residential, there's some business there, but there's a lot of residential neighborhoods, and then you could also have folks in that part of town say, well, wait a second, why are we getting all of these apartment complexes of different sizes, some much larger? Why isn't this a shared sacrifice across the town? And I think that's a very legitimate question.
It's a legitimate, what I would guess is that the area of the GBD 2 and 3 is an area that was supposed to be a real bustling commercial area. That was where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the idea is that why put it there? Are we just dumping it there, for example? Well, no, it's a main street.
Right.
People should probably live on Main Street, and it helps everybody out. I think that would be my argument because I have heard that already, not just in Winchester, but other communities are like, you feel like you're dumping density in a specific area. And the idea is that this is a strategic area, I think. Again, me personally, I won't talk for anybody else. I think if you're gonna put density anywhere, there's really only 3 areas of the entirety of Winchester where something should potentially change or get augmented. The Center Business District, there's still a lot of potential. GBD 2 and 3, still a lot of potential. And the IL district, which is the light industrial district, known up near Holton Street. Those are the 3 areas that need attention and need something new and different. So I would say that those are the 3 strategic parts, and we're not trying to just dump density anywhere.
How does this fit in? Sorry, how does this fit in with the master plan and all that work that went into it? We went through a whole process to do that. Now the state has come in and said, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to keep getting our money. So, as John said, is it worth it? Does it fit into what the community wants at this point, or are we going in a different tangent because the state's telling us to save a couple of dollars, here? And I know it could be some big money, but just.
Yeah, to answer John's question a little bit more, we have not gotten significant money from MassWorks. We have not tried to get the big, large parking garage or stormwater infrastructure through that. Back to your question about the master plan. So the 3 areas that I just mentioned, Center Business District, GBD 2 and 3, the IL, those are the 3 opportunity areas that came out of the master plan. So I can't imagine that, or we're not kind of responding to the state. It's more of this dovetails. We were doing this work anyway. It's a question of codifying it. Were we thinking, yes, we wanted 15 units per acre? No, but we were thinking that along the GBD 2 and 3, it was probably going to get higher with commercial on the first floor and 2 to 2.5 floors of residences. That was how all this was going to potentially work. So the actual numbers, no, like, that is fitting it in, but the general concept, totally through the master plan. We had a lot of different people all over the community that got, put into that master plan. I think we can point to it in the master plan that this area is this opportunity zone, where we can develop design guidelines and do something that we want. That's why we're contracting with Form in Place right now. They're looking at this visioning study along North Main Street, so it's not just dumping the wrong kind of development. Problem is it takes a lot of time and effort for all of those owners to come together, potentially, not necessarily all come together, but like realize that something may need to change going into the future. There's been a lot of non-investment. We haven't had a lot of new buildings in that area in quite a while, and we're trying to figure out why and then change it.
Anyone else?
Could you show us how, with the current zones now, where that sort of half mile and like, what would be this new MBTA zoning area?
So, whereas before you get to have all of the district within a half a mile, which is right up here at Clark Street. So if you go from the Rotary to Clark Street, this was going to be the area, not this whole circle, but it has to be within there. So the plan is that we can fit 50% of that within this, really within the center business district up to Clark Street, and then the rest of the district can be the rest of GBD 2 and 3. All of this zoning would actually stay put. So if you wanted to do a special permit in a specific way, you could. We would not change the underlying zoning. We would put an overlay on top and say that in this area you got to do all these things. These are by right. It has to be for this slide right in front of us right here. So that's how it would work. In terms of exactly how that, what parcels are gonna be what exactly, like, that's gonna take some time, and that's what we're not supposed to have right now in the action plan. It's more of figure something out, and then we would work with legal counsel, and I'm also applying for technical assistance. It opens in mid-October, not for the action plan, but to actually write that zoning. But yeah, that would be it.
And then GBD 2 and 3 is primarily, that's like the North Main Street piece, so it's it seems pretty narrow from.
Yeah, it's just about 2 parcels out up Main Street, and yeah, the thought is not 6-story buildings, if that's which I think that's probably what people think, but realistically, to get the density we would want or to be compliant, so right now you can build 3 stories 45 feet. And everywhere else in the residential zones is 40 feet. So in this GBD 2 and 3, you can build a little higher, 45. Maybe that stays at 45, but maybe it's 3.5 stories. So you can potentially reconfigure it, or it's, but it's not gonna be 6 stories, or even 5.5 for that matter.
Thank you.
So right now, the CBD has a requirement for affordable housing. How is that allowed in this?
That came out of the comments from the draft guidelines, and you can require up to 10, which is what we have.
Okay.
10%.
So that can stay then?
That can stay,
Okay.
and you can require that. I think the only reason the whole underlying zoning could, because we actually, in the center business district and the GBD 2 and 3, 10% at 80% of AMI, and then you have to do 5% of the units for middle income between 80 and 120. But because those don't go on the subsidized housing index inventory, meaning we cannot require 15% at 80.
Okay.
But people ask, well, what's the requirement? And you'll say, some people will say it's 15 here, but it's really 10% at 80 and 5% at 80 to 120.
So the 80 to 120 would have to go away?
I think it could stay. It's not determined. But I think it could stay because we're not requiring it to be deed restricted at 80 and below. Everything starts in terms of the state law at 80 and below. So if you're requiring between 80 and 120, it'd be like a one-off decision of DHCD of whether that would potentially be, be okay or not. How you would get around that is that you could allow these things by right, but you can allow more by special permit. And you can, like some type of bonus for something that we want. So you can do that through a special permit, but just, this is the base of it. It has to be at least, again, 15 units per acre, amongst the whole district, but like I said, you can do these subzones. So, again, the cake has not been baked clearly, right? There's a lot to be determined exactly.
There's guidelines coming out in November, right?
So yeah, we're waiting on this compliance model, that basically allows you to determine, if you're compliant or not, from the state. And they're saying that the action plan is due in January, but the compliance model doesn't come out to November. So it's a lot of trying to do things now, but we're still waiting for this compliance model.
So this is the Baker administration pushing this, or was this wasn't a legislative act, right?
No, yeah, this was definitely Baker, and, it was all about 100% housing shortage. Mike, you might know more, but I mean, it's because no one else could figure out what to do about the amount of jobs that Boston's creating and the amount of the housing that we're not.
So is it going to potentially, it could potentially change with the new administration coming in?
I find it to be highly unlikely.
I'm just trying to figure out if this is something, we put all this effort into it, and then all of a sudden,
I think
those rules change again.
I think most people at the state level understand and use the word crisis when it comes to the housing crisis that we're in at the moment.
I mean, this has been relatively well received outside of some confusion, right? And so it's, and I think that there were kind of two objectives from the Baker administration was the housing crisis, and, there's a lot of talk going on and not a lot of solutions. And I think that they wanted to put something forward, but I also think it's, maximizing the MBTA and keeping that alive, right? Those were two major problems for, the state moving forward. So I'm doubtful. I don't think it will be. I'd be really surprised if this was repealed or even addressed. That way it would be shocking. But I also think it's unlikely that we're going to see a lot of affluent communities buy their way out of it. I mean, I feel like the stakes are just going to get higher if we say no, we don't want to do this. We want to just forego, any of the grants that are there. I mean, it's so that's just my sense. I think that they were trying to motivate everyone to make this happen. So
I mean, I think it's a bit of a game actually, because I think over these next 2 to 3 years, the state's basically like, what if all these communities just be like, maybe we'll try to comply, maybe we don't, but we're not going to comply. What, they're just going to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars, at bay. Like, I think they're going to see how many communities try to comply, and then potentially, change their posture again. I don't know. It just seems strange that it's like all of a sudden this is a shall. You have to do this. But if you don't do it, we're just affecting these three. But like I said, it's like hearsay, but not really hearsay. That well, maybe if that's not enough of a stick, or the only way to get the carrot, maybe they gotta, I don't know, maybe they're gonna put a bigger carrot over here, or they're gonna use a bigger stick over there. It's so unknown, and I don't typically talk in those terms, just in general, but like, I'm trying my best.
this is good job security for town planners, though. I mean, that is, that's the good news.
I'll be honest, I have put a lot of time and effort. It's hard to explain, and I actually think I do have a good handle on it.
Yeah.
But the more I get a handle on it, the more I realize that there's probably, there's a lot of confusion going on around, and that ends up being the problem. Is whether or not anything about the legislation, the fact that everyone's confused, just makes it worse.
So I think the question is for the board, as Brian starts putting this action plan together, how do we want to be involved in that?
Is there the questions contained within the action plan, are those available at this point, or is it just?
Oh, no, it's, I can send the action plan around. So, it's like a 6-page, like fillable PDF. But yeah, no, I can certainly send it around so you can figure out exactly what they're asking. But it's essentially a timeline and a game plan. I mean, that, and the game plan being, we're gonna use these districts, it's gonna be this big, and we're gonna comply. Like, you don't necessarily need to show the nitty-gritty of how you're going to comply. It's more of generally what are you gonna do to comply without telling us all the words, and what is the timeline for that?
Which I think John and Diab had their
Yeah,
hands up too.
I see everyone. We have a jam-packed agenda tonight, so I'm gonna try to keep this moving along.
What action are you looking from the select board?
What do you-
So this sentence here, so I really need to know if you're not at least ready. So right now, the planning board has said we're gonna try to pursue this as a zoning change at town meeting. They
Future town meeting.
for a very future town meeting.
Not fall town meeting.
No. Or spring, or even fall after that. This is something we're trying to pursue. We want to stay compliant. For the next 2 years, all we have to do is submit that action plan. If we don't apply for any funding, we're compliant. We don't have to do anything for those 2 years. And then you can decide then whether you really want to do it, if you really want to know the letter of the law to be compliant. Are we going to apply, this is also kind of your question, are we going to apply to any MassWorks grants anytime soon that this would even matter? Nothing's in the pipeline. So we can make something in the pipeline. There certainly could be stuff in the pipeline along GBD 2 and 3 for North Main Street for a bike and ped plan, new infrastructure. I mean, there needs to be a whole bunch of infrastructure up North Main Street. So that would be the game plan.
So I think at least for where I sit, part of the problem is we seem to be shooting at a moving target a little bit here. I mean, we've
Yes.
got draft rules coming out in November, so it's hard to say what, our commitment is. I think, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I think, this is something obviously that has, garnished, 45 minutes worth of, questions and comments tonight from all of us. So, something that we're, paying attention to and that we certainly want more information as become available. As we sit tonight, we probably all need to digest this a little bit more. And think about, whether, what action steps specifically you're asking us to take, and whether, what we need to do with respect to those. So, where I sit, I would continue on the course that you are. You seem to have a ton of knowledge about this, which is great. But I think we need to see how this kind of progresses over the next few weeks, because the last time you were here, it was very different than it was today, so.
It's getting more nuanced. It's actually improving.
Yep.
So usually
Right.
Usually it doesn't go that way. It really is improving, and I think it's because so many communities were really expressing the same thing.
Sorry, I still don't understand, what is the determination that the select board has to do?
Sure, I think eventually, meaning that, I put it this way, I don't want to submit an action plan on behalf of, the planning department.
Right. So
That
that
that's
the
about
select
as
board
clear-
will
yeah.
support, okay.
Yeah.
So here's the problem, right? So yes, right now I support this. I think you should move forward. But by the time that this gets to town meeting, there could be 3 new members on this board,
Definitely.
right? So I can't tell you that the select board will forever support this. But right now, if you ask me right now, yes, continue with this. I think we need to do this. I think there is a housing crisis, and we have, and literally it's Main Street, right, that we're talking about. And the density is the same that is allowed pretty much today. So I don't see this as being a burden on Winchester. And
Is that
so
true,
I
Ron?
think that,
There's no change in density?
Yeah, so right here, in the GBD 2 and 3, you can do 13.4, so not 15 units, but right now you can do 13.4 of just residential.
no, you could do 26.8
No,
if
but you have to do commercial.
if you do put commercial on the bottom. So you
Right.
could have that density today as long as there's commercial on the first floor.
You could, but
And it would actually be much higher density.
that is correct,
Yeah.
but you still need to provide that commercial, which,
No, I understand, but somebody today could come in and build 60% higher density than what this is requiring. Because
definitely,
this is requiring 15 units, and somebody today could come in and build 26.8
that's,
units per acre.
But 26.8 by right?
Yeah, as long as, right? So-
Right, all I'm saying is it's just 10% difference, 13.4 to 15. So to your point, I'm making your point, and that's helpful, like, all right, so I'm trying to unhorribilize it. Like, it sounds scary. And then if you just talk like it's 10% change, well, most people would be like, okay with that.
But, I mean, what I'm saying is, somebody could come in today and do 60% more,
Yeah, no,
as long as they're willing to put commercial on the first floor. So again, there's no, like, this is not a big deal up Main Street, we already have this, mostly. We just have to change a few things.
We have the potential, yeah, I mean, the
Right,
way it sits right now, it's very close in all accounts, to be honest. I can honestly say that the density levels between the CBD, GBD two and GBD three are zoned for very close to what's required.
Why don't we table this for now?
I think the only thing I would say is that it's mid-November, I believe, the
I was
compliance.
gonna say,
yeah,
maybe we have you back in early December to
Yeah.
see
If anything
where
changed.
that
Because, well, the
puts us.
compliance model is gonna actually say, okay, I'm gonna put this here, like, it specifically will hopefully give us the information we need to be able to write a bylaw or an overlay that will be compliant. Without that, it's tough. So, if that's mid-November, yeah, beginning of December, but I would imagine everything's getting pushed to the beginning of December. I bet beginning of December is gonna be crazy busy.
I don't think we have a choice, right? We only have
Yeah.
till the end of January, so.
Right.
I dare go to the ADU bylaw now. Like, do we have enough time?
Sure,
That one's much shorter, and that's hopefully not nearly as confusing.
go ahead.
So, I said that this one wasn't gonna be quick, cause it wasn't. And this is more of a, this is much more straightforward. So this is just a quick overview of the ADU bylaw, what's written and how it affects people here in Winchester. So very quickly, what are we talking about? So an ADU is either, it's a secondary dwelling that's either, in the interior of an existing building, maybe you have an addition, call it an attached ADU, or maybe you already have a shed or a garage, or it'd be a separate. So these are kind of the three different ways you can get an ADU in general. Specifically, it's independent of the primary structure, has a separate entrance, has to have a separate entrance, but has to be secondary to the main one. So why would we need them? This is for multi-generational families, way to stay together. The kind of biggest positive here is individuals with disabilities and seniors that require independent living units in order to access these subsidies. That is the biggest thing that this bylaw could potentially do, is that it allows these people with disabilities and seniors to acquire subsidies and support services, and also allows these residents to stay in town and age in place near their friends and family and familiar faces and places. Super quick, just different people could be using these accessory dwelling units. So you could have a family with young professionals or newlyweds in the unit here, or maybe you have grandparents that are in the accessory dwelling unit. Maybe a recent grad moves back, or you could have the young family that's renting and have older adults in the accessory unit. So the idea of this is extremely adaptable and flexible, and this is just 4 instances that could work. So here's the meat of it. It's this slide and the next slide of what our draft bylaw, what the Winchester draft bylaws actually does. So one, like we said, it does attach, detach, or interior. All that, the use is by right. You're only allowed to have 1 unit per lot. So whether it's a single family lot or a duplex lot, you can only just have 1 unit, one accessory dwelling unit. So the owner or or the beneficiary of the trust that is the owner, one of them must reside in either unit. All of these things, by the way, are levers that other communities are pulling and pushing. So there's a lot of decision points that are made based on policy after looking at a number of different bylaws around Winchester. So at least one occupant in either unit must be, like you said, older than 62 or a disabled person, specifically as defined by Mass General Law. and it's a maximum of 2 bedrooms. So it either can be a maximum of just under 50% of the floor area or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. So it is a full cap at 900 square feet, can't be bigger than that under any circumstance. 1 dedicated off-street parking space. And as design related, the exterior changes must be the same style as the primary dwelling. This has to get certified when there's a change of ownership, and it also gets certified annually. So you're someone that's like attesting to the fact that they are either over 62 or have someone who's disabled in either of the units, and the zoning enforcement officer, kind of may inspect just like any other building permit. So these are the 2 main slides. If anyone had any questions, this again was just kind of an overview of how our bylaw could potentially operate. And again, these were all kind of decisions that were made along the way between the Housing Partnership Board, Planning Board, Housing Authority, Disability Access Commission, Council on Aging.
Can you go back to the first slide with the 4 uses?
Yeah.
So we're not allowing the uses in the top left or the top right, or the bottom right?
What? Say what?
We're not allowing the uses in the top left or the bottom right. This is
Unless
not
one of
what
those people is
Winchester-
disabled.
So in this case, we were assuming that this family, I see that these are young kids, so maybe they're not 62. I could see that. But if one person in this family, or in either family, is, but yeah, I think the way that this would work is either there's already someone who's disabled in the house, or someone over 62 in the house. Yeah. And then you said this one.
That would be the same thing.
It would be the same thing. So our rules apply, meaning that those 2 populations, one of them has to live in either unit. Yeah. And the owner also must live on site. And if it's owned by a trust, the beneficiary of that trust, like a special needs trust, for example. So the beneficiary of that would be the person who's disabled, so they would be able to stay here.
Any other questions? All right, I think we get it.
Great.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure thing.
Thanks.
I have this other 42-point slideshow. Okay.
Call you back at
Just
10 o'clock.
just thought maybe, yeah.
You're here for the Lynch School traffic.
I'm going down to Historical Commission.
You'll enjoy your 42-point slide. All right, let's, Roger, why don't you come on up to Capital Planning Committee update. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. You guys have a lot longer night than I do.
Just getting warmed up.
I think you've all gotten a copy of this, so these are the projects that we're recommending for funding this year. They're broken up into fall town meeting, spring town meeting, but that doesn't really mean anything other than when we're gonna present them. If you'd like, I'll just go through each one of these quickly and take any questions at the end. The first is a package of, for schematic design for 4 roof projects that we have. We've been told that we need to look at the slate roof on the town hall and on the library. We also have Ambrose roof that needs to be replaced, and Mccall, sections of the Mccall roof. I guess there are about 8 sections of the Mccall roof, and several of them are in very poor condition. So we're putting together a package to have all of those investigated, to exactly scope out the extent of the repairs and give us a price on doing that. The next is replacement of the town fire alarm system. We went through with the design on that, and the construction numbers came in much larger, so this is actually funding the construction on that. It's a 3-way win. It's a desire for the building department, the fire department, and it's also an ADA priority. After that, we've got the facade at Mccall Middle School, which you've all heard of for some time. That's got failing structural portions, and it's also allowing water to enter into the front of the building. That'll be a substantial amount of work. And also finishing off the replacement of the pneumatic controls in the classrooms of Mccall Middle School, and that will bring them all the classrooms under digital control and connected to the energy management system of that school. Following on the capital stabilization funds, the first one is the purchase of the sidewalk plow. We received a $50,000 grant due to the efforts of Representative Day, and this is the additional funding that would be required to purchase that plow. The next two things are bridge repairs at Cross Street and Washington Street. We had hoped to bring those at Springtown meeting last, but we weren't ready with complete engineering work, and so we're bringing that forward now. The next thing you may not be aware of, and you may have some questions about, is the Ambrose School sprinkler systems. Apparently, the way the sprinkler systems work is there's a header that runs along the top, and then wherever a sprinkler head exists, you have a drop-down pipe, and then the sprinkler head attaches to the bottom of that. For some reason, not entirely clear, we're getting either bimetallic corrosion, or maybe there was bad pipe gunk or something else like that, but that specific chunk of the drop-down pipe is being corroded in quite a number of places. The curse of Ambrose and water and pipes continues. So we need to go through and take the water out of the system, replace that specific little bit of pipe and the sprinkler head, and that's $70,000. It occurs under capital because it doesn't meet the $200,000 threshold that we would need to be funded out of the Building Stabilization Fund. The next, well-known to the board, is the Highland Avenue median islands, and the following one is one that I scratched my head at, that we waited so long to do this one because I think it's a spectacular project. Rapid flashing beacon down at Leonard Field. If you've ever been down there on Saturdays and you see the swarms of kids that are trying to cross the street and everything else like that, it's something that's sorely needed. Also this fall, under water and sewer, we're looking to do purchase a Vector vehicle, a truck, and you've probably seen them out there and gone like, what the heck is that vehicle? It's got all sorts of big tanks on it and everything else like that, and usually a long hose coming down, and it's a giant vacuum that you can suck out catch basins and things like that. This is a great project for us because we're going to save a lot of money with this. We currently spend $79,000 a year renting one of these machines, so because we have to rent it to go around to certain catch basins that we aren't allowed to use the sort of scoop that they use normally. So we'll have a great payback on this on a vehicle that we expect to last 10 to 15 years. We might be able to stretch it to 20. Next item is to address flooding or drainage problems anyway on the north side of the high school, the Nelson Street area. So we'll be going in and making some modifications to the drainage systems there. And the last one in there is Winter Pond water quality improvements, and I think someone here could probably give me exact details on what it is, but basically I think what it is it's a catch basin that's going to allow sediment to drain out before it actually goes into Winter Pond, and that will reduce the amount of sedimentation that we're experiencing in Winter Pond.
A question, those last two?
Yes.
Those two say construction, whereas the first one, the vehicles, is borrowing authorization.
Yes.
Are those last two, are they an expenditure directly from the
Retained
voters?
earnings.
From return earnings? Why
Yes.
are we not doing a borrowing authorization for those two?
We have the retained earnings in that amount, so I think that is typically what our choice is. That was the presentation that we got from staff, the recommendation we got from staff, that we take it from that. The other one is obviously too large. We don't want to drive it down that far. Springtown meeting, we'll see our annual appropriation for ADA, and this year we're able to fully fund roads and sidewalks to the amount that was requested of $500,000. There's also a new transfer station trailer that will look fabulous along with the improved transfer station. Then we have a wildland suppression vehicle. It's a gator style of vehicle, and it can be reconfigured to either carry, I think it's like a 75-gallon hose and pump on the back of it, or it can be configured to take out and extract someone that was injured in the back area that was inaccessible. We have a street sweeper. This is a conventional street sweeper. We looked at electric vehicles. They are out there. They were more than double the price, and it was just decided that we couldn't make that decision. There's also a front end loader, and we're looking at Wedge Pond, and this is engineering to take a look at Wedge Pond. As you're aware, that's where Beauregard Beach is, and if you're aware of the configuration, we've got Horn Pond Brook that runs in right past the DPW, and then very quickly goes out right behind the Stop and Shop. So we get very poor circulation in there. We've had to shut down Beauregard Beach in the past because of water quality issues. So we're hoping to look at, is there any sort of solution that we can possibly improve the circulation through that pond? And let's see, Woodside Road corridor improvements. That's going to come along after the electric work that has gone in through there and create an area where we sort of got de facto parking and de facto seating and curbing and things like that. So that's going to make that area far nicer. Water and sewer, we've got the MS4 permit, which is, it's a mandate, so we're gonna be doing that forever. Hopefully the lead neck removal, hopefully we're at the tail end. This is we're hoping that this is the last time we come before you and present this one. And then the $70,000 that we have for the cemetery.
Okay. Questions, comments? Well, we thank the Capital Committee for all their hard work over the summer.
No problem. Keep you guys on schedule here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Roger.
I think Frank's here too, and Frank and Michelle are here too, and Jay on the schools.
We're gonna go communication studies update next. So Lance, Carol. Wanna come up? Thank you.
Good evening. Appreciate the invitation, and I must say it's very pleasant to be sitting on this side of the table and knowing that you're all responsible for solving all these problems. This is a very positive change. If I can, let's see, if I can get to the slideshow there and start from the beginning at this angle. So what to do tonight is give you an update on what we've been doing. We're moving, as you'll recall, the town meeting created this committee back a year or so ago, asked us if we would report on communication issues in the Springtown meeting, which we did, and come back with solutions in the fall town meeting, and we're on the way to doing that. The committee was originally formed to look at the question of, are we communicating sufficiently clearly? And the basic underlying reason for that is that the media environment that we're looking at has changed radically. Local newspapers have been diminished. Ryan is still here, but I think he covers 4 or 5 towns. Yeah. So, yeah. Whereas in the 1950s, you could open the Winchester Star and in one sweep learn about almost everything that was going on in the town, editorials and others. Now you get it through this, what we call a kaleidoscope of websites and Facebook and things like that. And, so the shared news stories and the shared narrative of what's going on in the town is pretty diffuse. And you hear it's very difficult for people to hear and learn about what's going on in town. I think you probably all have had the experience I've had of having somebody come by on town day and said, "Oh, you're redoing Lynch School? I never heard of that. I thought you just did that a few years ago." Or, what's Waterfield? Or why are we knocking down the railroad station? And you sit there and say, where have you been for 10 years? But I think it's all symptomatic of the fact that we're not pushing information out. We're accustomed, certainly in the public sector, to having people come to us, pull the information out of newspapers and things like that. The world of digital, Facebook and everything and advertising is pushing that information out, and we're not sort of doing that today effectively. Things like that. So what we did, people told us, well, you're getting a lot of impact for poor communications. Residents aren't aware of it. We don't trust the government. We don't know what they're doing. We don't even know why you're doing Lynch School, sort of thing. Town meeting, I think you've seen the increases in debate time. Well, you didn't answer this question. And, we trip over and make decisions, or we postpone them, and that gets expensive. And then certainly for town government, if you're not communicating what you're doing and everyone comes back and says, you got to redo it. I mean, that eats into Beth's time, eats into all the staff time, and reduces the effectiveness. More specifically, what we heard, and this was captured in the spring meeting, is town website needs improvement. It's there, but if you go dig into it to try to find it, it's very hard sometimes to navigate. It's very hard. The search function is pretty dismal. Beth puts out a very good newsletter. Go try to find it. Okay, it's buried. It's buried. You got a file folder section that looks like Library of Congress. You have 5,000 entries. It's there. We heard a lot of people saying, well, it's simply not reaching us. Difficult issues. Mary Ellen did a count for me. I think we have 9 elected boards, 38 appointed committees and boards, and 21 departments plus the schools. If you want to track an issue across that, it's a tremendous headache. You can't do it, and there's nobody basically doing it. Town meeting members said, yes, we love the debates on the floor of town meetings, but motion books, presentations often don't get well and, don't support what we're getting there. We arrive with part of it. And now, in fairness, some people are known not to open their motion books until they get to town meeting, but that's another issue. Lacks context and understandable financial impact and no guidance on how to communicate. We talked with all 8 precinct captains, and about half of them said, we'd like to be able to talk with our precinct members regularly. The other half said, well, I don't even know who's in my precinct, sort of problem. So it was a set of issues that we heard. And I think you provided me with an excellent slide in your advertisement for the town manager position by listing and all these, you don't have to really read them, but listing all of the kind of issues you guys are facing in the next year or so. And I think if I were looking at, my role in a select board or my role as a citizen community, I'd really be worried about how effective we are at letting people know what's at risk and what's at stake out there, and making sure that when it comes to a vote, they know what they're voting about, so they're not at risk. This is probably the short list, I think, what's out there. Listening tonight, I think there's probably 10 more things to be had. So what we did was put together 2 sets of recommendations, one dealing with town government. The core message there is, we need to establish a culture of what it would call proactive town government communications. So basically, it's incumbent upon us, I think, to push the information out to people. The old model where people would come to us and pull it out is probably gone. The game field, the playing field has changed. It's tipped and not in our favor unless we get out there. We don't want to go as far as the Google where, every click is monitored and they tell you what you're doing. But I think the question is, if you're pushing out. So I'll just hit the ones in blue, which are the ones that the committee thought were higher priority ones. If you have questions about the others, let me know. But the core thing we thought was critically important to do is reconfigure the town website. It works. The landing pages are okay, but beneath that, it's terribly hard to find stuff. To find a committee, you need to know first whether it's elected or appointed. I still don't know them all, okay? To find Beth's thing, you have to click 4 or 5 times. The best comment I heard on one of the reviews, we talking to people, they said, well, the town website, yes, click, 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 screw it. And I don't think it's a matter of basically reorienting it from something that looks inside, that's built by people who know town government, to something that's set for people who don't know town government, in some cases don't know we have a select board or town manager, but how can they find their way in and what they want to do? And that's the critical thing. If we post information to that and they can't even get at it, it's a core problem. There's a couple other things on being able to research records and making town budget information more accessible. The other thing that is pretty apparent to us, we watched in all conversations with all the boards, you hear it certainly, but the town staff are pretty stretched pretty thin. And we said, well, why aren't you doing this? And they said, well, I'm spending my 35 hours and then another 10 or 15 hours a week doing the regular work. So I think it's very important to start thinking about appointing a town communications manager. I don't think, our recommendation is going to be town meeting. We did not get into the business of telling town select board or the town manager how to do this, but I think this is something that, got to look at, whether it's a half-time contract employee, a full-time, however we want to do it. We're going to need this kind of support in the future. Otherwise, the communications are going to lag and we're not going to see the support we need. Part of that is simply better defining the audiences. We basically now assume that if we broadcast something, people will pick it up. That's not the case. People use paper, people use Facebook, people use Telegram, Instagram. Half of them, when we looked at the statistics, don't do any 2. They just do 1. They never listen to anything else. So it's very segmented, older people, younger people, communities. It's very diverse, and we don't think that way right now, but a marketing company would. And then, proactively, again, this is the message, push. If we want, they won't come to us, we have to go to them, and we better start doing that. So we're already doing a good part of that, and Beth and the school department folks and others have been making changes as we're going along to try to push that out. It's underway. Last area is more closely what you're interested in, is, you know, we want to make town government communications a key priority for the town manager. The advertisement for the position did carry good requirements on that point, and I think that's very important, because if we don't get leadership from the board and the town manager, then a lot of this stuff will just fade, because people get absorbed by their day job. And we'll come back to this in a moment. I think the starting point is just a written plan for how you're going to get there, and we're basically going to suggest that you build on what's in here and decide, you know, when, what can be done, how fast, how it gets funded. That's a technical or an executive function that we ought to do, things like that. The other recommendations, less directly impacting you, but for town meeting, is basically to establish some better communications within town meeting and between town meeting and residents. The key thing we're intrigued with here is the idea of establishing an independent, not-for-profit town meeting members association as an online forum. Lexington set up a town meeting association in 1936, incorporated it in the late 70s, and sort of went digital within the last 3 or 4 years. Very interesting. They provide email addresses for all their current town meeting members. And there are things, so if you're a town meeting member and you want to email people in your precinct, it's all set up to go. They also provide a moderated listserv platform. So if you're a town meeting member, you can write something and say, you know, I listened to this presentation on the MBTA stuff the other day, and I didn't understand this and what goes on with it, or what are we going to do about this and such on North Main Street. And that can go out to all or just a few town meeting members you want. Only town meeting members can post to it. It's not a wide open Facebook, things like that. Although if you're a town meeting member, you can take something, if your resident sends it to you, you can then forward and post it. But it provides something, and this is town meeting members said, you know, I don't want to touch Facebook, I don't want to trip over an open meeting law, I don't want to do this or that. So this was kind of an interesting piece. They set it up as a completely independent organization, separate from town meeting and separate from the town government. So sits out, and it doesn't obviously then have to comply directly with open meeting laws, and can be sort of a neutral area. That was an interesting thing.
Question on that for you. So, and you said it's a moderated listserv, so who moderates that?
They have when they incorporated themselves, they set themselves up with a board and a bunch of committees, and they basically got somebody to volunteer. They assess everybody $5 a year to run the thing. Some people don't pay, but they do $5 a year,
Yeah.
Okay, something like that. But I think they use that to cover the cost of, they use Google, Carol remembers, Google, one of the Google forums or something, yeah, Google groups or something. So it's a very low-cost operation. It's, again, mostly volunteer run on the whole thing. So we're going to recommend that they make some changes to town meeting procedures. Probably the biggest one would be to preview the articles before town meeting, so to get out a month or more. Lexington does this. It's kind of interesting. They allow the sponsor of an article to do a video or a 10-minute show and tell, and then ask questions. And it's not, there's no debate, there's no vote or anything on the thing like that. But they said the big benefit is it stirs the juices and gets people going. In the next couple of weeks, people sort of say, well, it was a wonderful presentation, but it didn't tell me how much it was going to cost. So, okay. I put that into the presentation, so by the time you wind up at the floor of town meeting giving your presentation, you've had some vetting, and you won't be sitting there surprised when somebody says, well, you didn't do this, let's postpone it or table it or vote against it. The other thing that we heard...
Did you say it?
Sir?
They do that a month before town meeting?
Well, we typically, if I recall, Beth, correct me, we send out the motion book several weeks before...
It has to be a week.
A week, it has to be 7 days before it lands, but generally the motion book packet goes out, goes to the printer sort of mid-late October. And so if somebody's going to change their background or change their motion or fix it or something like that, you'd want it to come a little earlier. So sometime between the time the articles are actually submitted for the warrant and town meeting, you want to do this. Lexington does them 3 or 4 weeks ahead of their town meeting. And they also do them over the time. But the idea would basically be to get people thinking about it so they don't arrive on the evening of the town meeting and saying, what's this article about? I never heard about it.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just...
Timing would be an issue.
We'd have to change,
Yep.
how we do a lot of things around here.
And I think, this is, again, we saw our function as looking at the problem, looking at potential actions, and setting of basic policy suggestions. And then it's going to be up to the moderator and folks to figure out, can we implement these and try them and work them? But it's been quite effective, I think. Certainly, I mean, as an aside, one of the things that people told us when we talked, town meeting members told us, was that they said, well, town meetings are irrelevant. We don't debate. We don't know what's going on. Now, that's not quite true, but a lot of people sort of said, I don't know why I'm wasting my time at town meeting. And that's because I think they're not engaging early enough to pay any attention to this stuff, so I'm trying. The last thing we're recommending is that we put together some guidance. This would be the town meeting's responsibility on how to do constituent outreach and expectations. Again, some of the town meeting precinct captains said they regularly hold meetings or try to get a hold of them. Others said, you know, I can't get a list together, people's addresses change. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be doing that, you know, so there's no communication between town meeting and among town meeting, things I fix on that. The one warrant article we're proposing, in as much as our committee's report is to town meeting, the town meeting issues I've just gone through are things that town meeting can address internally. The town government side are things that I think eventually you and the town manager need to address. And we didn't try to blueprint that out for you, but I think the suggestion would be to basically take and put together a very brief communications plan for the town. My idea of that would be about 5 to 6 pages. We can give you a couple good examples. There are examples out there of people who go on for 100 pages of sweet words. Very useful, but, you know, begin to start. What's our audience? What do we want to do with it? What, you know, do we need a budget for it? Do we need a schedule? And we've arbitrarily put in a 3-year to match what you do for the town budgets on this. But this would be, it's a non-binding recommendation, I'm told, because we're not asking for money. But I think that would give you a chance to basically mine the recommendations we have here and begin to lay them out on a sequence that says, you know, Beth or somebody says, well, you know, I can pull this staff person in to do something now, but 6 months from now or a year from now, we'd program these out. So that's the core of what we're looking at. Every time we meet, and we have a chance to do so, people come up with better solutions. So if you take the version, actually there's a new version out that has changes from what I mailed you the other night. So if you have any brilliant new ideas between now and whenever we have to submit the motion book, please let us know. But the general message is, you know, again, the playing field for communications has tipped away from the traditional method of having people come in. We need to get into the business of pushing information out to people and making sure they know what making sure people are at least aware of what we're doing. And without that, I think people are basically saying, I'm too busy to go pull it out. If you don't tell me about it, I'm not going to pay any attention. And oh, by the way, when it comes to a vote or it comes to re-electing somebody like that, you know, I don't care, I won't vote for it. And that's the kind of downside of this. It's a creeping problem, but it's one that I think a lot of people told us it's getting to be big and sort of problematic, so that's the answer. Okay, so
Questions?
easy questions first, yes.
Comments, questions?
If not, I'll let you go on to 10 o'clock.
No, I mean, Lance, I've had a chance to meet with the group twice now.
Yeah, we
so-
did, we pinned him to his desk in the middle of August for about 4 hours, asking him questions and working on this. So thank you very much for your time.
Sure. It looks good. Look forward to seeing the final copy. I like how it's kind of a living document. It keeps getting revised with
Yeah,
ideas.
I mean,
as
it's
we
not
get
going to
closer.
change radically, but I think we're tuning it up, so.
Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right, next up, Lynch School. Traffic articles. I see Jay and Frank are here. You guys can come on up. Oh, Michelle, come on up too. Sorry to keep you waiting. So, Beth, do you want to just bring everyone up to speed maybe a little bit? Of what's
Sure.
transpired in the last couple of days, and then I
Yep.
know there's been stuff in the packet and stuff, so go ahead.
So just ancient history, the town received funding at Springtime meeting, $75,000 to do a traffic study around the Lynch School. The Lynch School project team through the EFPBC is concentrated on traffic improvements, interior circulation at the school. Our objective was to look wider in the Pond Street corridor and the Middlesex Street corridor. So Tool was here obviously last week, presented those concept studies. We're planning to have a neighborhood meeting during the month of October, and then another meeting with the PTA. We have a meeting with TTAC next week to talk about that. So a little bit more feedback on those concept plans. We don't have any funding at this point to take it beyond what you saw last week, so that's kind of where things will wrap up. As we discussed last week, we kind of had two options we were looking at in terms of how we fund this. So the first was to include it in the article that was sponsored by EFPBC and school committee for the Lynch reconstruction project and have it as one vote on January 7th. The other option, the board put kind of a second article on town meeting, is that it would end up being two separate votes. So one would be a vote just for the school funding, and the other would be a vote just for the transportation improvement funding. We did get, last week, we did get an opinion from the from the MSBA that the town could, if we wanted to, put the transportation project costs as part of the overall budget, and we have until this Thursday at noon to decide. And if we do want to move forward, we have some information we have to provide to the MSBA. If we decide that we don't want to move forward in that fashion, then we have to let the MSBA know otherwise that we're not interested in moving forward. I think that covers it.
So yeah, then we were at the EFPBC meeting tonight,
Correct.
6 o'clock, hearing some feedback from the participants there. I think, there was concern about, the current state of where they are with the MSBA, and, potentially, how submitting something by Thursday could affect, the timeline of the project. I think everyone agreed that no one wanted to delay the project. And then there was some concern about how, what control the MSBA would want over, specifically the road and sidewalk type of improvements we were making. And I think everyone kind of agreed, at least on our end, and probably in the group, that, it was best for the town to maintain control over that. And, I think the consultants hired to steer the project basically said that they've never seen the MSBA concede control to a town for these types of projects. So, I think at that point,
We did pose a question directly to the MSBA
Right.
about whether or not, if we did move forward with incorporating it into the overall project scope and budget, if we would be allowed to kind of manage and bid that project independent of the school project, or whether it would have to be part of the overall school project. And we have not received an opinion back from them by this evening.
So I think when we left, I think I've been told that DFPBC voted.
Yes.
Okay, and
Unanimous to not include it in our project.
okay,
Yeah.
so they don't want it in question one.
No.
Okay, so
Are you sure?
We're sure.
So, the reason why I was on tonight's agenda was, obviously we would need to move fast. We were just, saw the concepts last week. We have these neighborhood plans, and TTAC, meetings scheduled. But, if we were to submit something, the board would kind of need to get behind, submitting something in, with the MSBA and kind of make it a team effort. If, I don't see why this board would go against DFPBC's, vote in terms of question one. I don't see any benefit to it, certainly since we don't have the main question answered by the MSBA, which is, can we control the project? So, I think at this point, unless otherwise, you think otherwise, it sounds like that this scope of the project will not be in question one. Is everyone okay with that?
So it will be two ballot questions.
Yeah, so with that eliminated, we have two options, right? We've kind of set it up. We have an article for fall town meeting to put a second question on the ballot to deal with these improvements, and just, whatever sum we come up with, whether it's the full, some type of general amount to put on as a question two, to you know, to, for these types of improvements or, you know, specific projects, you know, looking at what, you know, Tool is put together, we can do it that way, or we can do it another way. Or the third option is, you know, we can, you know, take our time with this and not have a second question, you know, and see, you know, where we go with it with the neighborhood and everybody else like that. So, what is, knowing that question one is kind of off the table now and lumping it in with the project, I guess, you know, looking for feedback from my members about what you would like to, how you want to proceed with, understanding that this work's out there. We have a concept from Tool. There's still work to be done, and, you know, we need a funding source.
I mean, I guess, you know, my question is, you know, there's, as part of the project, there's going to be some, you know, traffic work, right? So like, and then ours is more expansive. I mean, I think that the intent of our policy is that, you know, we only do these schools, you know, once every 50 years or whatever, right? And so that's when we really need to look at the traffic circulation that changes, right? And address those needs while we're doing the school project. So, but I don't know if, as we expand out, I know that some people were saying, oh, we need to, you know, expand out to Canal Street and everything. I don't know if that's project specific. That seems like that's something that's a little bit more, you know, beyond the scope. So I guess I see it in multiple phases, right? There's the building construction piece that'll have some traffic, and then maybe we identify what the other phases are for the neighborhood. I don't know, but.
So maybe you guys can answer this, because I guess I'm a little confused by Mike's statement.
Sorry.
So the traffic part, that's part of the project, is on school grounds, right?
It is, and the approach into the school.
Okay. So like the entrances,
Right.
maybe the footbridge.
We're going to move, we voted to move the footbridge into the project somehow.
Okay.
It wasn't at alternate.
But that would be the scope of any traffic that's part of the project.
Right.
Okay. So it really wouldn't touch the neighborhoods.
No.
Okay.
Except there was a lot of conversation about queuing to get traffic out of the neighborhoods, to get it onto the site so that we're not seeing long lines of traffic while we're trying to get people in and out into school.
Like VO.
Like VO.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is lessons, right? I mean, you guys were on the board. The policy came from, you know, the experience with VO, the traffic light issue there, the middle school, stuff like that. So that's what put this policy in place. So here we are, you know, with our, you know, bigger, better, brand new school, and we're looking to implement the policy. So the question is, how do we best do that? Is it, you know, we have this, we had a traffic study funded, we completed it, we've got concept plans that we can build off of. The question is, you know, is it, you know, I think Tools, roughly it's $3 million. You know, if you think about it, it's two different neighborhoods, right? You got one side of the school and the other side, where kids, you know, kind of generally flow to that school. So the question is, you know, what,
How do we link it so we end up with a situation like with the third aqueduct? I want to avoid that, because I thought that was disingenuous.
which one?
At the high school,
Yeah.
they got the approval for the high school, and they were like, oh, by the way, we need $10 million to the field next door, because the high school basement floods, and we don't really want to have that. And that was the genesis for the third aqueduct. So I'm like, these two the traffic improvements in the school are linked.
Yep.
Like you wouldn't build the school without making the neighborhood safe. We talked about walkability and the whole experience there, and that would help with the queuing of the cars. So how do we link those? Because if we're going to spend $100 million, then let's fix the traffic at the same time. Because you're talking about 3% of the project cost.
So the vote that happened, that was EFPBC voted, not MSBA.
Great. So, to John's point, I think, you know,
We can still put it on one question. I understand that would cause a disagreement between the select board and the EFPBC, but we can still, it is the select board that puts the question on the ballot.
So we would have to submit the information to the MSBA by Thursday that they requested, and part of that is coordination with the project team from the EFPBC's project team to help us. We have to put the budget within the MSBA required budget form.
And to clarify, that doesn't mean it's gonna get approved by MSBA either. Just because you vote to put it on as the first article, this is just the first step.
So, if I could just add one thing, I think, trying to go back to your question, the other part of the vote the FPBC took was everybody absolutely agrees the traffic work needs to happen, and part of the vote was to co-sponsor whatever it is, if you decided to go with a second article, to co-sponsor that article, and be part of that process. Because clearly there's gonna have to be some coordination, and I think everyone agrees that the work needs to happen. And the only thing I would say, generally, my experience with the MSBA is they want us to figure out our family stuff here. They don't want to make those decisions for us. So I think there would be some concern if we're not, kind of together on how we want to approach this, which if we just going back to the interest, I think we're all interested in making sure that we have safe approaches to the building and doing it right. How, kind of how we get there is a separate question. And so I just didn't want to lose the point that there's unanimous support also to co-sponsor and support whatever you decide to do if it were to be a second question. I think was really kind of what was contemplated tonight in the vote.
But see, I mean, I agree with John, these go together, so, I mean, we can say that we all agree on something, but the reality is you walked in here essentially telling us, no, we can't do something, right?
That's one perspective.
Right. Well, I mean.
I'd offer another one if you're interested, but.
I just want to see the traffic portion fail, that's all. That's what I'm after. I'm not looking for state oversight of those improvements, believe me, hardly, right? I know
That's
it's
the question we
don't.
don't have yet.
Right.
We don't have that answered.
Right.
That could
And I don't
come
know
back
what risk
saying
you have
that
with
it's
that.
gonna come under
Right.
our project, and for some reason, it should have been a simple question they should have answered.
It would be super unique to see a project that the MSBA has already they partnered with us to select the architect and select the OPM. So that's who our contract is with for this whole thing. For them to slice out one piece of this and say, you don't need to use the chosen OPM who we helped you choose, or the architect, you can go on your own. It would just be, but I didn't think they would allow it to go into the question either to begin with. So I don't know what they would do, but it would be pretty unique.
So just to Mariano and John, to your points, I think I would be more inclined to agree with you if I had the answer of that we can control the project. I mean, to me, that's a huge, that's a huge issue for me, and just time is of the essence, right? We have to have everything in by Thursday. So if we were having this conversation, 3 or 4 months ago, and we've got this information that we could submit this to MSBA, which we didn't have at the time, I think we'd be in a different spot. But, I think given the time crunch, it's really tough.
But can we submit it by Thursday and get an answer and then go back to two questions?
So, I mean, they've given us the answer that they would allow it. What they haven't given us the answer to is how it would be executed, right? Whether it would be under the agreement with MSBA that would require us to use their chosen consultants, or whether we would be able to work with our own consultant and manage the project outside of their timeline.
And how would we get the answer to that question?
That's the question I asked yesterday, and
We've asked 3 times in the last
right.
40 hours.
As has the FPBC.
So just a question. So we've submitted a number, to the MSBA for the total project cost. So would we shoehorn, this $3 million into that amount, or would it be in addition to the amount that we submitted to the MSBA?
I believe your question was, are you allowed to submit an additional $3
Yeah.
million?
Yeah. Okay. So is that the answer that we have? So that if it was,
It would add to the project budget.
it would add to the project budget.
And MSBA would still need to decide to do that. Just submitting the information doesn't allow you to add that $3 million.
Right.
MSBA would still need to review your materials.
Right.
And then decide whether that.
I think a key factor too is, even if we get everything to them on Thursday, or you do, and they feel they can't make a decision, they'll put it off to the December vote.
Right.
And then we lost all this time, and that puts the election, puts everything off. So we might have got them everything they needed, but if they don't feel comfortable in voting on it, they'll put it off to December.
Their board meets 3 or 4 times a year, so they're considering this on October 26th, which is part of when they approve the project funding agreement with the number that we currently have in front of them. Or a change number based on the conversation, obviously, that we're having. So they've opened the door for that allowance, but.
Have we had previous votes with multiple questions related to the same project.
Yeah, we had
Yeah.
we had it for the high school, right? Did it fail?
District, yeah.
Can't remember, did it,
And the additional articles failed.
the first time? So they went back.
Oh, yeah, there were like 3 articles, 2 passed, 1 failed.
So if, I mean, I think that's the risk, is that it fails, and then it's looking for sort of ways to catch up and to get that traffic funding further down the road.
But would it be worse to have the project delayed? We missed the vote, and then the improvements are delayed for 6 months or longer, costs go up to build a school, so I think
That is
more
worse.
downside.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
We have to agree to that.
So to answer my question, like, no, we
I
can't do
know.
It might cost a little more than 3 million at that point.
But I forget how we did the Mccall, we did, phase 1 and 2 of that project, and I forget with the traffic stuff, was that a separate
It was
question?
all in
It
the same question, but
same
there was no MSBA.
There's no
or
MSBA.
Right, it was all
phase
local
2,
funding.
So
Yep.
it's all our, yeah.
It's all us.
So,
Although we didn't put enough, so that's why there was additional traffic money that had to be allocated to it.
Right,
We
that's-
only
that-
put
that-
$500,000
That's what I remember,
into
okay.
it, so then we got more from capital.
so expecting that we may land in this area, last meeting we voted, to have an article for fall town meeting to put a second question on the override, for the tool project. So we've kind of set it up as a backup to do it this way. So we can do it that way. Then the question becomes, do we want to stay that course with that article? Which basically would just offer, adding a second question with an amount, that, a bucket to do improvements over there, whether it's, 2 million, 3 million, whatever the number is. All right, do we set it up that way?
Yeah, so we just got the article back from bond council. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
To see if a town will appropriate a sum of money to pay costs of designing and constructing road and sidewalk improvements in the vicinity of the Lynch Elementary School, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, to determine whether this appropriation shall be raised by borrowing or otherwise, or to take any other action related thereto. And then the motion would need to have the dollar amount in it. So that's a decision we would need to make tonight, if we're moving forward this question, what that amount would be.
Right. So, I'm comfortable proceeding on that pathway and taking the risk. It sounds like we'll have some support from our school friends.
I was gonna say Frank's gonna crank up that lobbying machine. Oh, parents, come on. Second part of that question.
I do feel like that, we're all in agreement, with EFPBC, with the select board, the school committee, that the traffic and transportation is necessary, right? So I don't think that we're fighting that, and I think that the families that are going there to support the project will also see that. And I've talked to you a little bit about this, Rich. I think we're missing an opportunity to, put this on as this second question as an operating override for a much lesser number, and have that money be recurring there for school building stabilization and for traffic for all the schools. When you look at, Roger was in here talking about the capital projects that we're doing. It's school building stabilization that money ends up going towards. So, it's fine to fund it this way, but if we do have the benefit of a second question, I wish we would make more use out of it the way that we need to use it based on our budget. So,
The way that motion is worded, it doesn't preclude whether it's an operating override or a debt exclusion that goes on the question on January 7th. Right, this is just town meeting appropriating the money if the override passes, right?
That's the article. I haven't read the motion.
I think it does. I think it's a debt exclusion motion. Given the sum that we put in.
Well, town meeting always has to appropriate a number,
Yeah.
right? And then whether it's a debt exclusion or operating, that's a different question. That's for us to put on the ballot.
I think it would be worded differently, though.
That's a question for bond council. I wouldn't
So
wanna-
can we ask if we would have the option, because I agree, I think the need is never going to go away, right? The need for additional pedestrian safety improvements and traffic issues is never going to go away. So, if we put a question, if question 2, instead of being, let's spend $3 million, or let's bond $3 million, which in the end is,
Right.
let's say $300,000 a year, right? Or whatever it ends up being. If instead the question is, let's do a $300,000 operating override that pays for these improvements. As that bond gets paid out, that's more money that then ends up in capital that we can use for other traffic improvements elsewhere that we're going to need forever.
Yeah, I get it. My only concern with that is, we're kind of selling it to the public that, we're creating the special fund for these types of improvements. But in reality, one project is going to, tie up that money for, several years to come. And then we're back at the capital table asking for, those school projects.
The money will be tied up on that capital project either way, right?
Right,
It's either
that's the
tied
problem.
up as a
That's the
debt
problem.
exclusion and it never goes anywhere else, right? It goes
Yep.
down to 0, or it gets tied up on that project at the beginning, and then every year 2.5% additional gets kicked out into capital plus whatever we pay off of the debt that we usually do. We usually do level principal payments, so we're actually reducing how much the debt service is every year. So from year 2, year 2 there might only be $5,000 kicked out of that, but year 3 there will be $25,000, and year 4 is a truck, right? I mean, it's real money that we need in capital. So I mean, if we can, I agree that we should do it as an operating override for that. We have
So
an opportunity.
the way the motion is written, it says, passage of a ballot question to exempt the principal and interest payments on the bonds from the tax limitation. So,
Yeah, that's a debt exclusion.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
written,
it's-
I mean, it's not in the article,
Well, but we can rewrite
but
it as
right.
an operating override if we agree here.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
I-
article.
Yeah, we probably have some lawyers around that could do something, right?
I mean, the motion, the exact wording
Look at
doesn't
me.
have to be approved. The exact wording doesn't have to be approved tonight, right, of the motion?
So the motion books are due motion in background is due October 20th. So we would just need to have another meeting between now and October 20th. That's the direction we want to go.
But if we agree here that it's an operating override, we can approve that and direct you to have bond council or town council draft the motion to be an operating override, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
We can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would entertain that. I mean, I also don't mind meeting again briefly if we need to change a vote on something. If it doesn't, work out, we can meet on Zoom and we can, the schools haven't discussed this either, right? So, I mean, I don't know where they feel or where the EFPBC is, it's, we talk about this a lot, frankly, as an option for these overrides, and, it's hard to, with the backlog of capital projects, we can't go out for an override every single time for, the Mccall facade, people won't know what the hell we're talking about, right? So, I think it's an opportunity to say our school buildings need to be supported, especially now that with all these new schools, they're expensive to repair and they're expensive to maintain. So, I would say it's not just the transportation piece, but certainly transportation, building stabilization, whatever else you want to put in the bucket there.
So I guess,
Is that,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, is there, I mean, I think it makes sense in that then there is this money put forth to those things. Just thinking on sort of the flip side of that, is there a risk that that's gonna preclude people from future support into schools, knowing that this is?
I mean, the argument against it is that it's $50, forever, right? It's like $50 a year per household, whatever it is, right? But it's forever, right? The debt exclusion, as when the project is paid off, you don't pay that on your tax bill, right?
And we often use those debt exclusion, numbers, saying, oh, this is coming off the books this year to kind of justify future, projects and stuff. I mean, my only concern is, well, not my only, but one concern I have is, I think we need, this is coming to us at the last second here, this kind of strategy.
Sorry.
So, you know, I think we just need to be, I think we need to think about it. I mean, I think we need to, you know, make sure it's the proper mechanism. So to some extent, if this is the avenue that we want to go down, then maybe it's something like, you know, we put this on the question, you know, first, on the override question first, and then go to Springtown meeting with an appropriation, and do it in the reverse. I mean, just saying 500,000 or whatever the number is, 300,000, whatever it is out there. I mean, you know, I personally would feel a little bit more comfortable in, you know, that coming to light, you know, in one meeting, you know, because that's a whole different strategy than what we were talking about for the better part of a year with this traffic stuff. That's just me.
I mean, I don't know that we really talked strategy, we definitely talked the need, right, of the traffic piece being part of the project, right? So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know, we really had discussions around doing it only this way. I mean, there are only so many options.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always assumed that it would be some type of debt service, whether it be included in I mean, the real presumption was we would include it in the project, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a missed opportunity to have, you know, a debt exclusion for 3 million, and then another debt exclusion for 3 million, then another, and we keep going to the voters for those numbers when we could go to the voters once. And I mean, yes, I know it's not just once, but it'll be less times if we go for an operating override than if we go for a debt exclusion.
But I guess my question is, will it be really less times? Because, I mean, we've kicked the idea around, you know, we've done this with capital stuff before, and we've kicked it around, and we're kind of, you know, we're still short money. We're still, you know, we're talking about, you know, we've had preliminary discussions at this table just about, you know, the need for a capital, you know, debt exclusion override or something to do for capital. So, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I mean, but if the group wants to do it that way, by all means. Someone can make a motion and you can vote it.
If we look at what capital just brought forward to us tonight, is over $1 million for schools, so.
Yeah, right, that's what I mean. So, you mean, we're essentially making room for the other capital backlog that's there that, frankly, is hard to sell, right? So we're, you know, I think we probably should look at, you know, maybe having a conversation about a school stabilization fund with this money going in there to be, you know, continually rolling and managed that way and protect it a little bit. But, you know, I think in the long term, it makes sense doing it this way rather than what we've been talking about is going out for a large debt exclusion override for capital, you know. So there's, you know, we've got a project that's a school project that's a lot more expensive than we thought it was going to be. And, you know, we've got traffic work that needs to be done, an operating override that we're looking at soonish, right? I don't know. I mean, so I think it's worthwhile to, I mean, and this money, we could be using it for Morocco, for traffic there. I mean, it's good. It's, I think.
Make a motion?
Sure, unless Mariano wants to make it.
So I move that we direct the town manager to change the motion language on the question relating to the Lynch Elementary School that shows as article number 13 on our packet, to make it as a operating override question instead of a debt exclusion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll be opposed. All right. So that passes. So we'll have to have another meeting.
Yes.
Before what date?
Motions and backgrounds are due the 20th, so we'll figure out with bond council what the timeline is, and then we can schedule something.
Okay.
You can still do Zoom, right?
We can still do Zoom.
Still Zoom.
For a little while longer anyway.
I'm like, I'd make a motion, that's until 2025.
I second it. I don't have a vote.
So I think that takes care of Lynch for now. For now, I hope.
Thank you for staying there.
No, thank you, and thank you for working through this with us. It's not been an easy.
So now we're gonna go over the FY24 school budget, is that what we're doing?
I was hoping so. I've got some slides.
Thank you, everybody.
Turn your slide deck up a
Thank
little.
you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we're gonna sign our warrant articles. So,
Why don't we start on the seventh again?
because of the election. So,
Try the 10th.
so we
It's
start on
because
the
Rich
10th.
is on vacation, that's why.
May not come back.
Next week, the 14th and the 17th, I won't be here.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, so I'm missing the second and third nights. But I'll be here for the fourth night on the 21st. Before Thanksgiving.
Christmas Day, Thanksgiving.
Those are veteran moves, planning vacations during town meeting.
Well played, Mariano.
It's not vacation. It's annual sales meeting.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, Mariano, do we, so, you can't even, I was gonna say, you're out. We'll get you.
All right, see you later.
Thanks. Does somebody want to take, the, what, it was Article 13?
Well, it's gonna change.
It's gonna change now, so,
Potentially.
What
so-
article is
but-
that? Sorry, I don't
but
have it.
that's
That's the
Lynch School.
school funding.
It's
Do we
still
want-
subject to a successful override vote.
So this was the old
Right.
language that,
Yep.
I had given the board that was reworked by bond council.
All right, well, we'll table that for the second.
I'll take 27.
John will take 27. Washington, Swanton Street. Mike, do you want that? since
Yeah, I'll
you've
take that.
Worked
Yep.
that for
Yep.
so long. I'll take the Griffin Museum. If that's okay with you. Anthea, do you want the opioid stuff or Lynch?
I will take the opioids at this point.
The article.
Yes, maybe the opioids later.
Okay. And then we'll figure out, we'll see, we'll have to meet again and figure out 13. All right, so that was easy. All right, 416 Cambridge Street. So I think this is something that typically, Beth, your office does without necessarily any involvement of us.
The last one, I signed.
Yep.
New council, new opinion, so their recommendation was that the board authorize me to sign it. It's a regulatory use agreement that goes into place for the affordable housing units at 416 Cambridge Street.
But it really takes effect 30 years from now, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the agreement, so there's an initial agreement
Right.
with DHCD, and then the
Which-
town takes over as the local.
Right.
Yeah.
Any questions? All right. Can I take a motion?
Move we,
I think I had some language in the.
So, wait a second though, did you read the DHCD agreement? Not that you should have, but did anybody?
The one that
Yeah.
Beth had in the,
Not the one that's for Winchester, the one that goes before that? It doesn't look like they compel the owner to rebuild. Like you get a partial fire there and you end up with 50 units and you don't have to rebuild it. Did you read that, Beth?
I think
did
you
not.
do.
I was just curious. Get time on my hands. No. So,
we'll look into that.
no, but seriously, it's, if you think about it from a resident's standpoint, you could end up with an eyesore.
Yeah.
So just going forward, we would want to make sure that we either compel them to rebuild or there's some other action we take to make the town whole.
Well, I mean, this specifically had a crane topple over onto it, and they rebuilt it, so.
So they just walked away from that, right? So is that what you're saying? They just.
Well,
they just-
let's say that there was, they didn't buy enough insurance and they're underfunded, and so they end up with a
Are
project.
you trying to sell insurance here? Is that what's going on, John?
And so this happens, where they say, well, we're not gonna rebuild. And what's the town's leverage? We have no leverage because the agreement doesn't make us say, you've gotta rebuild.
Yeah.
Or we can take it. There's nothing like that in there. And it seems like to me that if that's a lesson learned, when we go into other agreements, we should not give the owner the right to create a mega CVS site for 10 years.
Right.
That I live 1 block from.
Mhm.
So, that's all.
We'll dig around
How
on
we
that.
learn.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
So, sorry, if you didn't want to interrupt your motion.
It's fine, I was able to find the language buried several pages of the packet. I move that, we execute the agreement and authorize the town manager to sign on the board's behalf.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next up, Eversource license agreement. This is for the transfer station. There were new copies that were presented to you today, just with a couple, just
Very
minor
yeah, so
changes.
we got comments back from Eversource's council at like 5:30 this evening. I had our council review it. They're, like you said, they're very minor changes. So this is basically allowing Eversource to go in and run the new conduit and install new transformer for all the work that we're doing at the transfer station.
We're gonna let Eversource self-insure.
Yeah.
Are they good for?
Probably not.
But I did want to change to that, to number 5, indemnification. To the extent allowed by law, the licensee shall relieve, protect, indemnify, defend, hold harmless the licensor and each of its members. Before members, I like to have current and former members.
Okay.
They're the same language in both agreements.
Yes, please.
Yep.
Any other changes? Any questions? Hearing none? Take a motion?
I move we execute the 2 license agreements with the changes proposed and authorize the town manager to sign on the board's behalf.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Beth, we don't have to do anything for the November 8th election?
No, I think
Town-
we don't have any.
We just have to sign
We
it
don't have
tonight?
anything yet from the state, right?
Right, we don't have anything, and they're actually, Alan found out that you don't have to vote or make a motion for it, it just needs to be signed by you.
All right.
So they could do that. Oh, they can do it electronically, right? We'll
They
do a
can.
DocuSign.
So as soon as she gets the wording, she'll give it to me, and I'll send it to you guys via DocuSign
Great.
with an email ahead of time.
All right. We'll do a consent agenda and then go to our last item.
I move we approve the consent agenda as posted on the October 3rd agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none? Great. All right, Beth, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right, we'll get, last item, town manager search. So we have it publicized. Applications are due October 13th. The next step in the process, once we get the applications, would be to screen the applicants. So I think, depending on how many applicants we get, I would think that this board would want to see, 4 candidates for the public process. So we've talked about using a screening committee. We've talked about, if we get a ton of applications, letting Paradigm do a first pass at them and then turning it over to a screening committee. My guess is, if we get, 8 to 10 qualified candidates, then, the screening committee would narrow that down to 4 for us. Versus, if we've got, 20 qualified candidates, and maybe we want Paradigm to do an initial screen and then give 10 to the screening committee and then 4 to us. So I think a couple of things to talk about tonight. One, the makeup of the screening committee. We got, when Paradigm was here, they gave a mock, what other towns do. Planning board, finance committee, school committee representative, general citizen, business background, civic involvement, that type of stuff. They said 5 to 7 individuals. would be a good screening committee. I think the goal of the screening committee is to get us those 4 candidates. Does everyone agree that 4 is probably the number we should be looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. So, taking that recommendation from Paradigm, I kind of just put together, an individuals that I thought would make a good screening committee for this process, based on those. If we were to adopt, the committee. They had a staff member, so I thought Mark, being here, the decades he's been here in the office, I thought Mark Toogood would be a good candidate for the role. For a community/business liaison type person, I thought Dot Butler kind of filled both those roles with her civic engagement and her work with the Chamber of Commerce. I thought, Chair of the Planning Board, Diab Jarius, made sense. School Committee Chair, Michelle Bergstrom, made sense. I thought Enzo Rascinato, member of the Finance Committee, who's been involved in various working groups in the Town Manager's Office between Waterfield. I think he's on the transfer station working group right now. I thought he would make sense. And then someone that I know has a lot of municipal experience that lives in the town, Cheryl Sabar, the Executive Director of Mass Association of Boards of Health. She basically provides legal assistance and guidance to hundreds of boards of health in the state. She's got a good municipal background, knows what works and what doesn't in towns, has a lot of experience dealing with town managers and municipal side of things. I thought from a health standpoint that she might make sense. So I thought that would be a decent screening committee, essentially to screen resumes. If we do get 10 candidates, maybe they do want to conduct an initial interview with Paradigm, leading them. The idea would be they do, probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 Zooms. I think everything would be done by Zoom is what Paradigm told us. And then get us, go through that process and get us, 4 candidates. So that's, I thought I'd come with a proposal for all of you tonight to consider in terms of that. Again, they're only screening. Ultimately, we would get, those 4 candidates and go from there. What are your thoughts on that process?
I like it, I like the candidates.
What else? Any problem with that?
It's fine by me. I mean, I think, it's, the role is a screening one, right? So it's not necessarily substantive in that way, right? It's just evaluating whether they meet our criteria moving forward. The
Yeah.
only thing, as part of the process that, we should talk about too is when we say 4, and what if there are, only 3? Like, what's the?
Well, that was gonna be my next
Okay.
step. So, I think if we get anywhere, if we just get, let's say 5, okay, 5 candidates, I think then, we would probably want to handle that
Yeah.
process ourselves. There would be no need for a screening committee. I think anything above 5, we'd probably want them to narrow it down to 4. Does that?
My concern with that is, number one is, just the input from the community, right? I mean, I think having the chair of the planning board and the school committee and somebody from I think everybody that you mentioned puts a lot of input into that, so there's that. But the other thing that I'm concerned is that if we get 5 and we say, okay, we're gonna handle it ourselves, then all 5, their names become public.
Yep.
Right, so there might be somebody that's really good that is like, wait a minute, I'm gonna pull out because 1 out of 5 are not good odds, right? Whereas if it's 3 or 4, they might be willing to be more public. So just from the standpoint of candidate quality, I think it's better if we have that screening committee. Even if there's 5, that screening committee to say, okay, this one, no, we'll get it down to 4, or maybe there's only 3 that are qualified, right? And we have to make that decision that we're okay with 3 or 4. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I could go either way. I just didn't know if, what does everyone think? I mean,
I agree with that. If people are potentially not being given that opportunity to say, I actually want it to be known that I'm applying for this, or maybe it's not a step I'm gonna take. I think it does give them just a little, leeway or kind of safety
Yeah.
within that.
I mean, what we see regularly throughout the Commonwealth with this process is, really exactly what Mariana was sharing, that people will drop out, if they get moved forward. And so it's a little bit of a game in a way. And I don't know if there's any way for us to, have the screening committee to have a conversation with some of those people, like, hey, like, we hope this isn't just a negotiation, help you move forward, a salary increase where you're at, right? I mean, I get it, but it's just, if people start dropping out, and we end up with only 2, that's not great either, so, it still is feasible. It's just, this is kind of what, the problem was last time, where it was just like, there was a understanding that we would have 3, right? And we would only move forward if there are 3 people, but I don't think that the market right now will possibly drive those numbers. So I just don't know.
So, is it the pleasure of this board that the screening committee be involved, as long as there's 4 or more candidates? Is that fair to say?
That's, it's fine. I'm good with the.
Yeah.
And we can always revise right? If there are 3, then we can change the
Yeah.
process from there to still allow input
Sure.
more substantively.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is that if we get to that point where we're not using screening, we can change the process to have that.
Yeah, because the screening committee is not big, right? That's not a huge lift.
The, looking at the calendar, so the position closes
The 13th.
the 13th. Is the idea that, they would meet within the next 2 to 3 weeks?
I think so. I mean, I think we need to, maybe we could circle back with Paradigm, but I think that's the idea, is to keep this moving quickly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because it's such a quick turnaround, that maybe also asking the planning board and the school committee for Diab and Michelle, if we're setting some dates, or if they're agreeing upon dates, that if they're not able to attend, that they're able to have a designee from the school committee or the planning board instead to attend, just to make sure that that process continues to move along and doesn't get hung up.
Yeah, I guess the only thing with caveat to that is if they attend one meeting, I would want them to attend all of them.
Right.
Like, either in the process or they're out of the process, yeah.
To, commit to, however meetings are scheduled or planned, that, they'll be able to designate someone else from the board, and making sure that with the other folks who are on there, that they're also committed to those dates, so that we can keep that really moving forward.
Sure. I mean, I don't think this is I think it's a very finite period, and I don't think it's a very heavy lift unless we get, crazy amounts of resumes, which, we could or we couldn't, I don't know. We'll just see where we land on the 13th. So is everyone okay with that for screening committee?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll implement that. The next question I had is just, because I think this could come up, is that, all these individuals have worked in some capacity with Beth, whether it's town engineer or over the last year as acting town manager. So I guess giving them some guidance on how to handle what I assume would be her application if it should come in. So, what I would like to see happen, and I think there's precedent for this, at least, in my limited experience of being on this board, but I do think, internal candidates, typically get an interview for the job and what we do. So I think, given, what she has done in the last year, I think she at least deserves, an interview, with us for the role.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think just taking that out of the equation for the screening committee would, I think just make, would probably prevent some questions that could arise from those people in that process. Does that make sense?
Would we be asking the screening committee then for 3 candidates in addition to Beth?
I think we should say 3 or 4. I mean, what does everyone think? I mean, I think it depends on how many we get. I mean, that's, you know.
No more than 4.
I think the ideal number would be 3 from them, plus Beth.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But, you know, if they say, look, we have 4 candidates that we can't decide, then we can take it as it comes then, but I think we should message that the ideal number would be 3. Right? Does everybody agree?
It's fine with me.
Okay. So
And the screening committee is just doing an application review and moving them forward, and that's the extent of sort of where they're at.
yes, with the caveat that, you know, they could conduct, you know, a round of interviews if there was, you know, a number of candidates and they felt it helpful to the process.
Phone screen.
I'm sorry?
Phone screen.
Yeah. I think it would be a Zoom screen. A Zoom screen.
A Zoom screen.
So we'll proceed with that process. Maybe Anthea, you and I can jump on a call with Paradigm, just to make sure that those instructions are clear, in the next couple of days. Any questions? Anything else on the town manager search? Okay. I think that's everything.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
You want to wait till 10 o'clock? All those in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you, WinCam. Good night.
Thank you.